Nowadays, when you go inside a school, you expect to be in a safe place and just basically go and learn and do basic high schooler things, not knowing the consequences of your actions. When in reality, high school is a place where you learn how to be your true self. And let's just say people that reveal themselves in high school end up showing their scariest selves sometimes. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name is Bubba and welcome back to another crazy but super scary story. Now, I don't really like telling scary videos on this channel, but let's just say this one story was one of the most traumatic stories ever. Now, I remember this story all takes place back in my grade 9 year. Now, in grade 9, I was a freshman, so I was totally new to the whole high school thing. I didn't know absolutely anything, and if anything, I was called fresh meat because, well, I don't know, I guess people like to pick on me since I was like the new kid in school. I don't know why, but growing up, every time I went to a different school, I would always get picked on by some person at that school that felt like he had some superiority, you know what I mean? Some sort of aura that's around him, even though he was just another bozo like me. But I remember when I was walking down the school hallway one time with my science textbooks in my hand, because we got given 3 science textbooks, which I don't really know why, but to be fair, school is school. I didn't really care. I just wanted to do what I had to do to get out of there. But I was walking down the hallway with my science textbooks until one kid just ends up walking up to me and he just slaps the textbooks out of my hands and starts laughing at me. I end up looking at him and I'm like, dude, like, what's your problem? Like, seriously, like, are you okay? Look at you. You look kind of dumb now. You have no textbooks. This guy absolutely sounded like a dummy. And I'm gonna be honest here. I didn't see him as a real threat. I thought he was just some guy that was just like, you know, maybe didn't have a good relationship with his parents and is totally lost in this world. But I got super annoyed by him to the point where I told him to just buzz off and I picked up my textbooks and walked away. When I walked away, I remember I ended up noticing that there were like people staring at me and realizing that I stood up to him, which is a good thing, but at the same time a bad thing because people thought I was somewhat crazy in the brain for doing this. I don't know why people thought that, and I thought, you know, like, bro, I just stood up to the bully. Like, usually in the movies, when you stand up to the bully, it's a good thing. But for some reason, kids in my school thought I was the crazy one for doing that. But there's a reason why that we'll get to later. Because I remember like 3 weeks go by, and after a month of being in high school, I started noticing like how to behave like a proper high schooler. So at this moment, I'm like walking around, you know, I'm just hanging out with everybody, you know, vibing, chilling, and got my friend group formulated together to basically not feel like a total loner. But as for this one bully, I remember there was a time where I was sitting in the cafeteria, okay, and it was mac and cheese day. Now, I don't know how many times I mentioned mac and cheese in my channel before in like the story times, but in high school, the mac and cheese was like the best thing ever. So I remember it was lunchtime and I go up to the cafeteria and I go to the store and I, you know, pick up my mac and cheese and I start going out to pay for it. But as I'm heading out, this guy, right after I finish paying for it, ends up walking up to me and saying, "Oh, yeah, I see you got me mac and cheese, huh?" What? No, this is my mac and cheese. Not anymore, loser. And he ends up grabbing it out of my tray and walking away with it. At this moment, I'm like, dude, are you serious? Like, that's my mac and cheese. Like, what are you doing? Now, this guy was majorly shocked that, you know, since I was a freshman and he was a senior, that I was even considering standing up to him. But since I've done it before, I thought I could do it again, but this time not let him get away with it, feeling like he got the, you know, the win, I guess you could say. So I end up getting really mad and I just end up looking at him straight in the eyes and I start flaming him. What do I say to him? Well, let's just say I ended up getting a bit personal with him, where I ended up saying, dude, I get it. You have no girls, you're ugly, you don't even know what to wear. All your clothing are from Old Navy, and you're broke. Like, who cares what you're gonna do, huh? You're gonna take my food because you're too broke to get your own? At this moment, I realized that girls in the cafeteria that were like in table groups started laughing, but not laughing at me, laughing at what he was doing. And it got to the point where there were actually some of my friends ended up standing behind me being like, yo, bro, just give him back his food. Like, you're kind of a weirdo for that. And it got to the point where this bully got so embarrassed that he ended up grabbing his food, that he ended up giving me my food back after he even took a bite out of it, by the way, which I was not gonna eat. But he gives it back, puts it on my tray, and runs out of the cafeteria. At this moment, I am not joking. I thought, you know, that was the end of it. He's not gonna bully anyone anymore. He learned his lesson. I win, you lose, you get a big fat bruise. I thought that was the case in this situation, but sadly it wasn't. Things ended up getting a lot worse for this guy. And you know what? For the rest of this story, we're gonna call him Trevor. Now, Trevor, for some reason, I don't know why, but apparently after standing up to him, people started coming up to me, talking to me about Trevor and telling me how, you know, he's been bullying kids, you know, since grade 9, and how he, like, you know, he likes picking on people for some reason. And he even ended up slapping a girl one time, and that's why no girls end up actually even talking to him. Now, I'm gonna say this right now for anyone watching this video: never hit a woman, okay? If you're a dude, don't hit a woman, okay? It's not cool. It doesn't make you better. It doesn't make you stronger. I hate to break it to you, and no matter how bad this sounds, guys, we are very violent, okay? But girls are not supposed to be violent, and we should treat them with respect. Simple as that, okay? Nothing mean by it. And girls, I'm not saying you guys are not strong. You guys are obviously very strong, but in different ways, okay? Because I'm not gonna lie, in high school, even though I was like, maybe weighing like 135 pounds, I could still knock out some women, okay? And I don't mean that in a bad way. No violence should be done. YouTube, I'm not saying to do violence, but going on with the story, when I heard about Trevor hitting women and, being a bully, I was proud of myself. I felt like I was a hero that day until, let's just say, when time went by, Trevor started being seen less and less. Kids that were also getting bullied by Trevor ended up coming up to me thanking me that Trevor's leaving them alone. And I was weirded out because I was like, huh, that's weird. Usually when you stand up to a bully, he starts picking on other people, but now he's not even bullying you guys. And it got to the point where I started to worry even more because even teachers in classes started realizing that Trevor wasn't even showing up to school. I started to kind of worry about Trevor at this moment. And even though he was my school bully, I didn't understand what was going on and why, he wasn't showing up for class anymore. So I remember one day after school, I ended up figuring out where Trevor lived from one of his old friends that he used to have that became not his friend anymore because he was a bully, obviously. And I decided to go to his house. So I remember I ended up going to Trevor's house. And when I saw Trevor's house, I realized that this guy lived in a really broke neighborhood. He was honestly in one of those really old townhouses that were full with a bunch of problems, and there was moss and a bunch of gross stuff, and it looked like no one ever mowed the lawn. I think you guys can understand what I mean when I say a really old broke house. It was really, really sad when I saw this. I don't know if it was because I was privileged growing up, but one thing was for sure was that when I saw Trevor's house, it made me think more of him. And I remember I ended up walking up to the door and I knocked on the door. Right away, this little girl answered. This little girl answered the door and she looks at me and she's like, who are you? Oh, hi. Is this Trevor's house? What are you doing here? No one comes to see my brother. Oh, yeah. I was just wondering, if you could tell him I stopped by and just, tell him I hope he's okay. That would mean a lot to me. You want me to tell Trevor, my brother, that you are thinking about him? Yeah, I'm just, worried about him. That's all. What, is my brother gay or something? What's wrong with you? What? No, it's not nothing like that. I'm just, just trying to figure out where Trevor is. That's all. Okay, sure. Whatever. She ends up slamming the door in my face, and I can definitely tell that in this household, even though they live pretty broke, they had a major attitude, okay? I want to say a couple weeks went by, and it got to the point where Trevor didn't ever show up to school at all. Trevor was non-existent, and most of us thought that he died or he transferred or, he just wasn't ever going to show back up again until the day of terror. What do I mean by this? Well, I remember it was right before lunchtime, and this was 5 months into my junior year. And I remember I'm sitting inside my language arts class, which is, basically the class where, you sit and learn. Well, you don't really learn language or art. You kind of just end up, doing fun activities. And as I'm sitting in that class, I end up hearing on the announcements that there's a code red. And when the code red happens, you start hearing in the announcements, students, there is a code red, code red, code red, code red. And they keep saying it until it stops. And at that moment, the teacher ends up looking at the class and saying, okay, everybody, go to the corner. Everyone just go to the corner, go under your desk and stay quiet. At this moment, I started thinking it was a drill, and most of us students thought it was a drill. So we ended up just basically going on our phones and basically not caring. But then afterwards, we ended up hearing shots. Now, this is where, I am not joking. A lot of the students in our class started thinking that this was still a drill and not an actual, lockdown. So they start going on their phones and they start filming on on their phones oh guys, it's school lockdown, oh my goodness, even though it was actually a real situation. It's crazy to think about, but guys, drills are known to be proper procedures that you need to follow, okay? It's not a joke. No matter how many times the school practices it, it's something you need to remember because times like these are truly existent. Anyways, I remember everyone was pulling out their phones and I was even pulling out my phone. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't think anything was happening until I ended up hearing more shots getting closer and closer. Apparently, Trevor was walking through the hallway with his father's weapon and shooting the lockers at our school. I was actually getting scared because I thought these were real shots, but then afterwards, there was a girl in my class being like, oh my goodness, they make these drills seem so real. Anyways, can I go to the bathroom? At this moment, our teacher looks over at the student that said that and she's like, no, just stay quiet. Just please stay quiet, everyone. And I can tell she's panicking because she knows that this is not a drill. So I start basically getting scared. I even moved my desk to make it the flat part facing forward towards the door because I didn't know what was shooting around inside the school. By the way, if this is TMI in any way, shape, or form, YouTube, understand that this is somewhat educational because people need to understand. These get scary. Anyways, after that, I ended up looking outside at the school window, and I realized that there was a window I could get out of. But then the school bell started to ring, and that was when Trevor decided to shoot the most shots possible that he could. At this moment, I ended up hearing like, sirens heading towards the school, and I was terrified until finally the announcements ended up saying,
"Students, please head to the gymnasium. Thank you."
we all stood up. We all one by one ended up going to the school gymnasium. And I'm not joking. As we were all in a line walking towards the gymnasium, the amount of students that were terrified and had fear in their face was insane. And as we were walking through the school hallways, I remember looking at everyone's locker, and I started realizing that there were bullet holes shot in those lockers. It was severely insane. It was honestly scary, to the point where I remember I like didn't know what to think. My mind was totally blank. And to be honest, at this time, I didn't even know it was Trevor still. I thought it was just some lunatic wannabe gangster kid doing this. Anyways, I remember when we all sat down in the gymnasium, our principal comes up to the front of the school, and he mentions how Trevor, a person in our school, has been arrested. He mentions how basically, apparently a lot of people were not thoughtful of Trevor, and Trevor ended up going towards an act of violence. At this moment, we were taught to never bully anyone, and taught that no matter what, be respectful towards others, no matter what they do, and love your enemy, which is kind of crazy because that's actually a quote from the Bible, to love your enemy. I'm not really like, I never really say Christian stuff on this channel, even though I am a Christian, but I will say this, like, it was actually really terrifying, knowing that Trevor did it. And honestly, I think at that moment, I felt like partially to blame as well, because, like, it's crazy to think about stuff like that happening in the first place. Anyways, afterwards, I remember we all like ended up basically going back to school, like a regular school day. Some of us actually ended up going home because we were too traumatized to stay in school. But me, obviously, I'm not gonna lie, it was my first year, and I was pretty young, and my brain wasn't developed enough to really understand what was going on, I guess. I remember right at the end of the school day, I ended up going up to my locker and basically like, get my things and leave. But as I walk up to my locker, I saw the amount of bullet holes, and no joke, partially I thought it was my fault that Trevor went towards this direction because I stood up to him. But at the same time, I don't know, as time went on, students started realizing that, it was their fault, and we all ended up having like a group like talk, and a group that basically spoke about Trevor and how we feel bad for him. I don't know where Trevor is now, and by the way, Trevor is not his real name once again, so please don't go searching around and stuff, because obviously, like, as much as I want to, like, say real names and stuff on this channel, I gotta be respectful of people's privacy. But if you guys have ever been in anywhere near this scary of a situation, please comment down below, join the Discord, and click on one of the videos on screen if you guys enjoyed this one. And like I always say, fall for more embarrassing stories just like this one. Peace out, guys.